It ended at 6:55, so the next 5 minutes, 30 minutes, about a minute.
It is 7 p.m. Today is Tuesday, July 8th. We'll go ahead and get started by calling the meeting to order. First of all, thank you for those of you who came out on this hot summer day to be here and join us. All right, we'll go ahead and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, any changes to the agenda, Dr. Finch?
No changes.
All right, communications.
Just one communication. We have a response to public comment. At the school board meeting on June 24th, a community member commented regarding prayer at school board meetings. The response is this: the community member mentioned an occurrence that took place at a city council meeting in California. The school board meeting is different than a city council meeting. Case law has addressed this issue specific to school board meetings. The school board is prohibited from sponsoring or endorsing prayer at a school board meeting. A school board meeting is an open public meeting. This means that it is a meeting of the school board that is open to the public. The public comment section of the meeting is intended as a time for the public to provide input to the school board. It is not intended as a time to circumvent the prohibition from sponsoring or endorsing prayer at a school board meeting. Case law notes this specifically and prohibits, quote, the creation of a de facto opening invocation during the public comment period, close quote. That concludes the response to public comment.
All right, thank you, Dr. Finch. Next we go to, let's see, item 6 on the agenda, Facilities Master Plan. Now, do we have a presentation for this?
Yes, we do.
All right, long awaited.
All right, well, I appreciate the board had requested. It was time for us to look at our Facilities Master Plan. The last plan was presented to the board in 2020. It's a effective practice to revisit the plan at least every 5 years, and so here we are, 2025. We had a study and survey last summer And then we had a long-range facilities master plan, long-range facilities planning committee that began in November and is now culminating in this presentation here, July 8th. So very excited. We have Natalie Shirzad and Tony Farina are representatives of the committee, and they've agreed to present. We have our consultants, Phil Crocker and David Bodine, here this evening. And then we'll have another presentation regarding the bond rate. That's from Corey Plager from D.A. Davison. He's here this evening in person as well. So we'd like to have the board go ahead and join the audience. So we'll be able to look at the presentations. We'll go through both presentations first, and then we'll have the board come back and have some question and answer for our consultants. We don't need to have question and answer. I told Natalie and Tony they don't have to be prepared for question and answer, but we have our consultants that can do that.
We're ready for it.
What's that?
Did you have paper copies of that?
No.
I do have recordings.
So here's the-
Thank you.
All right, so we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So good evening, board. I'm Tony Farina. This is Natalie Shirzad. Obviously, we are excited to be here and present to you with an update and recommendation from the Long Range Facility Planning Committee. So for a little history and background, the Long Range Facility Planning Committee was formed after the successful completion of the high school in 2006 and the failed bond attempts that followed. It was clear that the public wanted a well-thought-out plan to address the district's maintenance and of aging buildings and their teaching plan to best utilize the space they've been given. A study was commissioned and paid for by a grant from the OSPI to study and survey the buildings for two things. One is physical condition, and two is the functional adequacy. That survey was used to create a long-term plan that became the basis for the 2019 bond to replace Apple Valley and Summit View, along with returning the elementary schools to a K-5. Part of that plan is to reassess the schools every 5 years. So a new study was completed in fall of 2024. That study graded the physical condition of all the schools and scored them on a rating of poor, fair, good, and excellent. As you know, kids and time are hard on buildings. The survey also graded the functional adequacy of each school, which is looking at the classrooms, the size of the classroom, the number of students per classroom, technology in the classroom, the safety of the facility, specialty spaces such as music and science, and the support spaces for admin and custodians. That too got graded on a rating of good, fair, poor, and unsatisfactory. What's that? Oh.
Okay, so we brought back together our Long Range Facilities Planning Committee in November of 2024, about 8 months ago. And some of those group members are here tonight, but we had 30 members of the community and staff, of the district staff total, along with our expert consultants that are listed there. Oh, no. Yep, okay. So we worked over 6 work sessions since last November to study the facilities, condition reports, and the educational programming and financial information and all of the data that was provided, and that Tony just mentioned, the functional adequacy of the space, and then also the facilities conditions, and determined the needs based on that data and educational programming needs of the district. And we also considered the community's response to what our recommendations would be. And so we had some overarching goals and objectives for our planning team. The first one was, with the high school bond retiring, we wanted to keep the bond rate at or below the current rate that it's at now. We also wanted to keep community assets like the junior high gym, the junior high auditorium, and the central kitchen that are located at the junior high right now. Those are used by the entire district right now, so recognizing the importance of those. And then also we really wanted to define the mid-level campus. Right now it's kind of 2 separate buildings that are an ad hoc one campus, but we wanted to move all those kids into one building, grades 6 through 8, to just really serve them as one school. And then we wanted to obviously update facilities with the highest needs, the ones that were more marked poor condition on our functional adequacy and physical assessment. And then also, if we could, address any additional district-wide needs when possible.
So with those goals and objectives in mind, along with the building report, this committee worked hard and asked the tough questions to explore all the different possibilities as we move forward into the future. We are proud to make the following recommendation for the board to consider. This recommendation fixes the schools with the poorest condition rating and lowest functional adequacy scores, along with aligns with the teaching goals of the district. We would like the board to run a bond in February of 2026 to, one, replace Atanum Elementary with a modern school and expanded size. Two, update Mountain View Elementary with a full refresh, which isn't a new school, it's going into the existing school and make updates for safety. We want to combine the mid-level campus from a middle school and a junior high to one middle school, and it'll house grades 6, 7, and 8. We would then like to repurpose the junior high into a district office and maintain the gym, the auditorium, and the central kitchen. And we want to complete the necessary capital improvement projects from across the district. So let's go into each school. So the first one's going to be Atanum. Atanum was built in 1950 and was last updated or even touched in 1993. It's rated poor from a physical condition and a functional adequacy. We're proposing a full modernization, much like Apple Valley and Summit View. This is going to add 6 classrooms, a cafeteria, and much needed specialty space. Atanum, the footprint of within the district is the largest. It pulls from the largest area all the way from Tampico down to, what is that, 53rd or almost?
52nd.
Yeah, 52nd. And the Atanum Valley is ripe for future growth and expansion, so we want this school to be able to have that capacity to handle that space. The total cost of this project is going to be $38 million in today's dollars to add the additional space and do the full remodel. Next up is going to be Mountain View. So Mountain View was built in 1949 and was last updated in 1993. I was actually there in 1993. That was my last year there. Go Mustangs. I can tell you it looks the same now as it did when it was updated in 1993. It now is rated poor from a physical condition and a functional adequacy. This is a refresh and update to make it look and feel like a well-loved school again. It will update the water pipes and improve safety. The total project cost of this is going to be $2.3 million.
Okay, so then at the mid-level campus, like we talked about earlier, right now we have grade 6 in the middle school and grade 8 in the junior high and across the parking lot from each other, and then the 7th graders move back and forth throughout the day. So it's not ideal for our safety, students being outside, unsupervised, doors being locked, that sort of thing. And then it's also really not efficient from an educational programming because you have teachers in one building or the other and they can't serve all the students together. So we really wanted to keep them or put them all together. So to do that, we would add a big addition onto the middle school and move all the students over to the middle school. That building also needs a full upgrade to the HVAC system. So we do that as well. And then we would repurpose the junior high. We can leave it mostly as is with a little bit of updated maintenance and use it for district offices. And then also we keep the kitchen and the gym and the auditorium that are really important district resources there. So the junior high was built in 1978. So the junior high right behind Atanum and Mountain View is our next oldest building. So if we were to keep it as a school, it would need a massive amount of capital to update it. So I think in our group that we all discussed, it was cheaper to add on to the middle school than to try to redo the entire junior high. Because the middle school was built in 1995, so it's newer. It doesn't need as much updating. So that's the plan for that one. It also enabled us to use our state matching funds for the middle school building. So there's kind of a domino effects of the timeline that they all kind of work together. So this timeline assumes that the bond would be passed in February of 2026. That's kind of what our recommendation is. If it doesn't happen at that time, it would obviously cause all of these things to happen later. So Assuming February 2026 passage, then we could start on some district projects in the summer of 2026 and start doing some minor upgrades at the junior high to just keep it going for the next several years. And then we would start construction on the mid-level addition and expansion in 2027 and 2028. And then once the 7th and 8th graders move out of the junior high could house the Atanum students for 2 years while their school's being redone. So that creates some efficiencies for the Atanum construction project with having the students off-site for 2 years. So that's a good use of the junior high. And then eventually when Atanum is done and those students move back to their new school, the junior high would be turned into district offices like we discussed. So that's kind of a high-level timeline. And then, so here's the capital costs for the middle school campus, or the middle school building, and the HVAC upgrade, and the 85,000 square foot addition, $71 million in 2025 dollars. And then the junior high has, oh wait, did I go to that? Yeah, there, okay. The junior high has 3.3 million in minor updates needed just to keep it going, and then to convert it to district offices. You can see gym floor, auditorium upgrades, which would be used in the long term, and then water piping and the district administration offices. Okay. And then we had some other capital projects at the other schools in the district that aren't getting major upgrades. Cottonwood needs some foundation repair. White Hollow has some flooring, and then gym floors at the Innovation Center in the high school. And then finally, once those district admin offices move off of Zero Road, we would convert all of that space to parking for the football fields and other play fields. So those are kind of the other 5 minor projects, relatively minor. Okay, so you can see now all of the projects that we just went through outlined for you. In the middle is the 2025 cost, and then looking at the timeline, we know those are going to need to be escalated for the out years of our timeline. So you can see the cost on the right for the full value is 141.3 million. And that's assuming a 2026 bond.
The good news is we don't have to shoulder this all ourselves. There's state matching money available, and it's going to be on the 2 biggest projects. So because Atanum is a full replacement, we can maximize our match there. And because the middle school is an expansion and a replacement of the junior high, we can utilize our full match there as well. So of the 141.3 million, we've got 43.8 million available in state matching. So the total cost to the district would be 97.4 million. One of the things that the board had asked us back at the June 2023 board meeting was they asked this committee to come back for recommendations for utilizing $2 to $6 million, so $2 million to $6 million worth of the existing bond funds. So we did take that into consideration, and we'd like to propose using 4.9 million in this project. So by using 4.9 million of the previous or existing bond funds, this will allow us to start the construction and start that timeline in the summer of 2026 before the bonds are actually even issued in 2027. So it would allow us to start the timeline and make a lot of those improvements in advance. It also reduces, by starting it early, reduces the escalation costs. As you saw on that slide, things get expensive because this is a 6-year timeline between 2026 to 2031. It's also going to lessen the tax burden because we're going to ask for less in the next bond. It addresses the needs to safety and mechanical systems now before they become expensive emergency repairs. So here are the recommendations for that 4.9 million. At the junior high, we would do the auditorium now, we'd do the gym floor, and upgrade the water pipes. At Mountain View, we could do the entire Mountain View facelift without utilizing any of the bond money, or the new bond money, I should say. Cottonwood has some foundation cracks that need to be addressed, and the gym floor needs to be restored. White Hollow is flooring throughout the building, staff, parking lot sidewalks, and the gym floor. The Innovation Center is the gym floor, locker room, and locker room floors. At the high school, it's gym floor refinishing and restriping, and then by the district office is going to be the tennis courts, refinishing those. So that's going to be the $4.9 million in existing funds. So looking at the total cost, if we utilize that 4.9 of existing funds, it brings the total cost of the bond. So this is going to be the total bond cost, is going to be a request to the taxpayers and to the voters of $92.5 million. And that's maximizing the matches, utilizing some of the remaining bond funds that we already have. And what I found really appealing about this is if we spend $92.5 million and get $43.8 million match, that means we're getting a 47% match on our money. So that's really impressive. You don't see school districts getting a 47% match on what they spend. So looking at the bond rates, again, as Natalie said, our goal was to keep bond rates at or below existing bond rates for the taxpayers. So in 2027, the high school bond is paid off and done. So you can see the high school bond gets removed in 2027. And that's where we would then propose a 84, and we're projecting this to be 84 cents for every, was it $1,000? So we'd be asking for an 84 cents. So the total taxpayer liability is going to be $1.53 per thousand, which is in line with 2025 and 2026. So the tax rates stay essentially the same and results in no increase to the taxpayer. So in closing, our recommendation from the committee to the board is to run a bond for $92.5 million in February of 2026. This will address our 3 oldest schools with the lowest functional adequacy rating and the poorest condition scores. It maximizes our match from state money with $43.8 million. And it meets our goals of keeping taxes the same or less. It brings together grades 6, 7, and 8 all under one roof, which also improves safety and creates efficiencies in one building over 2 buildings, such as reducing maintenance and staffing costs. So this is the next step in our over 10 years of long-term facility planning. And we ask you to consider this as our recommendation.
All right, and we'll have Corey come on up.
Great to see everybody again. I was here last April to talk about the bond defeasance, but for those in the audience that haven't had a chance to meet me, my name is Corey Plager. I work for a firm founded in Great Falls, Montana. I'm based out of the Spokane office, and I strictly support Washington K-12 school districts. I have the luxury of working with Sheila and Peter on anything tax, debt service fund related. We put together some information for you today, and we're going to kind of get to the same punchline that the committee just shared, but I'm going to do it just a little bit background here as we go through. So what we're not going to talk about today is the education program and operations levy, also incredibly critical for your student success, and that existing EP&O levy is approved through 2026. Those are for levies are for learning, whether it's for extracurricular athletics, janitorial, special education, transportation. As I said, very critical. but we're not really digging that too far today. Or a capital projects levy. I don't believe the district has a history of doing capital projects levies. You've been able to satisfy a lot of your infrastructure needs with bonds. Bonds are for buildings. That's what we're going to focus on today. It could be new construction or renovation. And you have up to 40 years to issue bonds. However, most schools try and balance how far out you go with taxpayer impact. So you're not going to try and minimize interest earning or interest costs too much and do like a 5-year bond. It'd be so expensive for taxpayers. So 20 years tends to be that sweet spot where we can find that balance between trying to minimize interest and trying to also minimize impact to your citizens and your homeowners. Your debt capacity right now, if the committee said, please do 225 million, that's as high as you can go. That's your legal limit. It's not your logical limit based on taxes. Since the high school bond was issued, the district leadership team has refinanced bonds twice and saved taxpayers over $4.2 million. So what that means is they waited for the call date, and once that was eligible for tax-exempt refinancing, they jumped on it with the board's approval. And that is $4.2 million that you did not need to collect from taxpayers because the debt payments were reduced each time you refinanced that debt. And I know Michael was on each of those, and I think Mark also was a part of that as well. Just a little bit of a lag here. Real briefly, in the green colors are the success of your education program and operations levies. You'll notice that every school district we review has a little bit of a roller coaster. Whether there's a recession, whether there's a different president in office, there's always something to kind of indicate this voter sentiment. But you'll notice overwhelming support for almost every education program levy. And then the bonds are a little bit more tough because, of course, 60% supermajority. But you'll notice in 2019, 60.8%. 2006, it's a little, I used the worst color font there, 61%. Another thing that's interesting too is each of these bond attempts have had a different amount. So you can see that the board and the committee and the community has adjusted the plan as time has gone on. So in April of 2015, this was attempted. There were made adjustments to the plan up and down, and those adjustments ultimately got a lot of support in 2019. You'll notice in 2022, the EP&O levy did a little bit less than you've received support historically. That's common statewide after we had some of the challenges with the pandemic. So just a little bit more about bonds. If you've seen a new library, you've seen a new park, a new bridge, new city hall, almost every single municipal entity, if they're doing improvements, they're doing it through voter-supported municipal bonds. Rarely we'll see federal grants or we'll see military bases or other things that are done differently, but for the most part, if you're seeing improvements, it's with the support of the people. So most bonds are tax exempt. You'll hear people say, well, now isn't the right time to do a bond because mortgage rates are 7%. Well, the good news about being a municipal tax exempt available entity is we're borrowing in the 4% range right now. So yes, is that 4% higher than normal? Yes, but it's still not that 7% that we get to borrow from if we're doing a car or a home loan. The 60% is still the biggest hurdle. In green are the states that have 60%. You'll notice there's not many. There's states that we have an office in Dallas and they're doing high school football stadiums for 30, 40 million and they're passing like crazy. And we're having a hard time getting elementary bonds passed in Washington State because that's 60%. So you might have seen legislation to try and get that changed, but it takes a few years to get that kind of support, whether it's 55% or 50%. And one of the keys is validation. You won't have to worry about that. Your voters are consistent voters. You always have to look back to the prior November and make sure at least 40% of those people turn out. And because you'll be looking back at a non-presidential election, you have enough turnout. So validation is not a concern in this instance. So why now? Now is a great time, and it's perfect when the facility convenes and has a recommendation, and it just happens to be at a time when other debt is maturing, right? Here we are sitting in 2025. After 25, we have one more year of payments on that those high school bonds that were split into 2 sales. And then you'll notice from here on out, we just have the final few, 8 or 9, 10 years on the elementary bonds issued in 2019. So if the board was to do nothing, you'd notice a significant decrease in your tax collections for infrastructure support. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. You heard the committee recommend earlier that this would be a level tax rate. There is some skepticism there, right? When people say, okay, why is it not going to cost me anything? It's going to take some education from folks saying like, okay, I have a 16-year-old and I bought him a car because my car just ended their car payment, so our budget is unchanged. So it still means they're going to be paying a tax, but it's not going to be more than they're paying previously. So it takes some education because there's some skepticism when you tell folks, hey, great news, we can do all these projects for what you're currently paying. That's a hurdle still. It's not as easy as it sounds. Just one more slide to talk about the bond success rate. I mentioned that levies have done great here for the last 20, 25 years as far as our records go back. Bonds are a little bit more difficult. This year, 45% of bonds are passing, and you'll see there's only been 11 attempts this year, but we've had a little bit of a dip in success. You'll notice 40 to 45% of measures passed over history. After the pandemic, we had 0%, 20%, 10% passing, so we're optimistic now with the results in 25 that we're kind of through all that. There's been some time to help us heal some of these wounds, so we're optimistic heading into 2026. You might ask the question, is now a good time? I know our EP&O levy is up for renewal. We don't want to jeopardize that. What do you think about the data behind running two measures at once? And we don't know the real answer why, but we know that there's hundreds of examples on both sides of this. Districts that just run an EP&O levy and just run a bond on the far left. If you just run a bond, it passes 42.7% of its time. If you just run an EP&O levy, 92% of the time passage rate. If you're in them both together, and that's the right-hand side, on the same ballot, the bond is really unfazed, about a 2% higher success rate, but the EP&O levy passes 100% of the time. We think sometimes they look at the two and some people just want to support one. And we're not trying to challenge the voters to say no to the EP&O levy by saying, look at this statistic. But overwhelmingly, since 2015, and I could go back to 2008 and the data is the same, is that there's no real challenge here. So why is this? Anecdotally, if you can ask people at once for taxes and say we won't be bothering you for a while, right, 4 or 5 years, that's some power. And when you can explain the two differences side by side, it's easier than passing one, than coming back a year later and passing another one. They'll say, I just passed that. Because some people don't quite fully understand what you're asking for. They're supportive. But sometimes over time they can adjust that opinion. So this data says, don't be too hesitant about running them together, but you know your constituents better than me and my data. So just kind of planting that seed. We shared these slides in April, but I think they're worthy of revisiting. In April, I shared how your tax base has grown significantly over time, and a good chunk of that increase has been new construction. This year, for example, 77 million. You've had almost $500,000 in new construction in the last 6 years. You've had almost 750 million in the last 10. So one thing I think about is how to have those folks help with this new infrastructure, right? They moved to town, they're helping offset the taxes for everybody else that's here, but you'll notice there's been a lot of reassessment of existing homes as well to keep in the back of your mind as you consider this. Things have settled down a little bit this year, 3% growth. We've noticed that statewide. Things have just kind of gotten back to normal after the chaos post-pandemic when our home values went up 20% just here and there. And I think there's been a little bit less flexibility now for people to work remotely, so that's kind of having an impact too on Eastern Washington. We also shared this slide in April. What happens when your property values boom, but the district's asking for a locked-in bond amount and the EP&O levy hasn't been inflated significantly? You'll notice that tax rate just slowly declining over time. In 2025, the rate is $277. If we go back right before the pandemic, it was $4.10. Has that decline in rate meant that people aren't paying more to the school district? I can't say that. It depends on each individual home, but that sure does help offset some of those property value increases. But I'll say there's some entities within the county that can tax you based on rate, whether it's a cemetery, fire, library, county. So they might be benefiting, and so I would say most people are paying more, but I can't say that the school district's getting a lot more, right? So there's other entities that are maybe a little bit more responsible, and fortunate for them, they don't have to ask for voter support like we do every few years. I'm not sure how important this is for decision making, but want to get this in front of you for the record. This shows you any school district that has territory within Yakima County and what they have. So you'll notice a few schools don't have bonds, like Highland, Mabton, Mount Adams, some of the smaller schools. But for the most part, each school has a bond. A couple schools have capital levies. Really, just to summarize this, I sort this alphabetically because I work with many schools in Yakima County. I don't want to highlight who's number one easily. But I'll tell you this, I think you're ranked 11th right now. So right kind of in the middle for the most part. But this is just something to put in your back pocket. I don't think somebody says, I'm gonna run a bond because I want my tax rate to be right here. I think a lot of it comes down to what are the needs, and I'll consider rate when it comes to, do we want to be the highest tax in the county? Probably not. And as I said, just more data points for decision making. So on the home stretch here, just a couple more slides. What goes into the bond plan? You saw from the committee what that levy rate looks like, but what goes into that levy rate? How do we plan for that? The first part is interest rates. We just issued bonds last week for Lake Stevens School District to the tune of about $110 million, and we received 4.3%, and they have a rating very similar to you. So that's what we're expecting right now for your school district, as I mentioned, not in the 7% range, 4.3-ish. We have an interest rate cushion built into this model. So we're not going to pretend that things are going to stay rosy and level right now. It's been a little volatile in our world. So we built in interest rate cushion, and I'll share that later, because we don't want the board to go forth and make a recommendation and tell the neighbors, look, level rates, and then interest rates go up because of tariffs, and now you're telling your neighbors, sorry about that. You said yes, and we promised this. So we're putting in a cushion, and we hope we don't need it. And if we don't need it, that means we're overstating the rate right now, and the rate will be lower in actuality, and that's happened over time. But we'll show that in the next slide. Your rating, you're a AA3 rated school district, which means it's investment grade credit, highly desirable across the nation. Most of your investors will be institutional investors in New York, Boston, Los Angeles. They're gonna be big vendors. We're gonna see some interest locally as well, but for the most part, your interest rates are too low for your citizens to want these bonds for the most part. So we're gonna see usually bigger investors, and on the tail end, a lot of insurance companies like State Farm, Allstate, Liberty. There's gonna be a bunch of investors of that sort. As I said, high bond rating, and you get the state to essentially co-sign on your bonds, and they're guaranteed by the state, which gives you extra credit power as well. We already talked about your assessed value. That's who's paying the bills. We've seen that grow. You're a $5 billion tax base now. And the last piece that we're not going into too much detail, but I mentioned you have up to 40 years that you can do a bond, but 20 is that sweet spot. I'm going to show you the 20-year structure. That doesn't mean you can't consider 21 and a half years, 25 years, and try and stretch out this bond a little longer. But this model I'm about to show you is a 20-year model. And so you saw the slide. One thing that I added to the slide is my assumptions down below. So it's pretty clear. It shows that we're taking advantage of when the high school bond falls off to add this new bond. As I said, it's very convenient and it's very fruitful, but how do you communicate that to folks as well? But down below, I have a February election, and I have 20-year terms. We're using conservative AB growth. Your AB growth right now is about 8% average over the last 5 years. We're using 3% in the first few years. That means if you continue to boom and new construction continues to come, then this tax rate of 84 cents is overstated. I have an interest rate cushion of 75 basis points in sale 1 of June of 26, and I have a 1% cushion in 27. If interest rates actually stay level or go down, I'm overstating that 84 cents. Our goal here is when we ultimately sell these bonds, that maybe the tax rate's 74 cents or 76 cents. And that as your community keeps booming, that rate keeps coming down over time. So 10 years from now, you're in a position to do this again if you'd like. One thing that I'll also share is that Apple Valley and Some of You bond mature in 2038, I believe. And that's when you have another step down. So you'll be able to reconvene your committee at that time if the needs aren't earlier and be in the same position to do another bond, hopefully with a minimal tax rate increase. So we're not absorbing all of that with this new bond, just a slight amount. So that is and one final note, none of these numbers include the defeasance, right? So we're kind of keeping that on the side. I saw the committee requested, can we utilize that for this project? It's, there's not a huge difference between lowering the bond amount versus defeasing it when it comes to the impact on the tax rate. There wouldn't be a financially beneficial way one way or the other. It would just be public perception on what their preference is. So it's a lot of information. I'm pretty quick, but happy to answer any questions.
Did you say that last part?
Yeah.
One last time?
So whether you utilize I think it was $4.5 million, the previous unspent proceeds from your bond towards this project, or defease the 4.5 million right now and then ask for 92 million, because if you defease those bonds, it comes down 9 cents, and then you ask for 97 million instead, the impact to voters would be almost identical.
But just clarification, there could be a use of those funds, and then there's still funds remaining to defease as well. So there's could be 6 million to defease, and you were thinking that'd be about 10 cents?
10 cents?
About
Right.
10 cents if
So
we.
you get the
defease
best of
6
both worlds, right? Yeah.
If we defease the 6 or we defease the 11?
If we defease 6 million, it's about 10 cents per dollar. Let's go ahead and have the board join back up front, and we'll have Bill Crocker, David Bodine come on up, and be ready for any questions that you might have. Make sure we give credit to Phil and David. Phil led us through facilitating. David was there for all the technical questions, and appreciate their work to help this plan that we presented tonight.
Okay, I'll kick it off. Since I have notes. First of all, great work for the consultants and the committee. I read through all this stuff and took a lot of notes, and great detail. Really appreciate it, well thought out. Most of the recommendations make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I appreciate that, and I'm kidding by saying this, but I'm a tennis player, so I love the tennis court. But I have a few questions and comments, and I'll ask the questions, and then Mr. Strong, I guess it's up to you if I save my comments to later or use them now. But my first question is a little bit in the weeds, but I'm just curious. I think I know the answer, but I'm on page 3-8 on this document, where it talks about utilization rates. I'm assuming that it's using the best estimate figures from page 2-3.
Holy smokes, that's my document and I don't have it. Thank you so much. I want to say yes.
I would assume that because you're probably not going to use the higher or lower, but what did it
Oh,
say?
for utilization rate, correct.
For utilization
For
rate.
your actually, for we project out for your utilization
Correct.
into the future, correct, is the best
You're
estimate.
using the best estimate.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a good question though, because some committees decide, like, we think we're growing faster than the projections or slower, but this committee felt, and I think we were 99% accurate. We looked back the last 2 years on the tool we used for the projections, so we felt pretty positive. You're not very volatile.
Okay, great, thank you. And I don't know if this is who this question goes to. Mountain View's improvement, does that include something that helps with the traffic on Stone, or was that addressed with the new parking lot? It might not be you guys' question. I don't know whose question that is, because I've still heard that that's a problem on Stone with a lot of traffic, and I didn't see anything in the Mountain View's improvements that include that. I'm just curious.
Well, we're still working on adjusting the current parking lot so the traffic flow, we can kind of maximize that more than it currently is.
So that wouldn't be in the...
I'm not sure if that's related.
But the site itself, when I met with the principal, they're trying a couple different patterns and
Okay.
trying to address that. There is a sheet that the district has that lists, that's on the district's sheet, and there was some changes there, but I don't think there would be a major one because that would be a significant cost to be repaving.
Yeah,
But
I noticed there was some repavement
Correct.
in the recommendation. I didn't know if that had anything
Correct.
to do with the traffic flow.
No, I think that the district has made changes there, and then the school is working to restructure like Watts parking and Watts flow for parent.
Okay.
It's mainly parent pickup.
Okay.
Is the primary issue there.
Thank you. And you were talking about the 20 and 25-year bond. It'd just be nice to see out of curiosity at some point, just another slide at some point, you know, what it would look like the other way?
I could summarize it
I'm
real
not-
briefly. Because you have outstanding debt with the Apple Valley and some of you bonds through 2038, stretching it out doesn't build a benefit up front from a tax rate perspective, maybe a penny or two. What it does do is in 2038, it builds a bigger drop down. So if you push more bonds into the tail end, it could mean that bigger, instead of a 30 cents, it could be a 75, 80 cent drop down for the next round of bonds. And you can see what that generates based on your tax base. So 25 years gives you more flexibility, because if the board adopts a 25-year plan, when it comes down to the actual pricing of the bond, you could do 23, you could do 20, you can do anything shorter and try and meet your tax rate goals if interest rates go down. But if you do a 20-year bond, you can't go the other way. So there is some flexibility, but for the most part, the impact is not upfront as much as in 2038.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you. On the presentation from Natalie and Tony, the one slide mentions using 2 to 6 million of existing bond money. And I guess just to clarify, my understanding is we have 11 million left of that bond money. But it said 2 to 6 million existing bond money to save on the requested amount. Yet on the next slide, your total requests 4.9. Are there different recommendations that would be lower than 4.9, or why was the 2 in there on the one slide?
That's what the board had given us as parameters. They said if you had 2 to 6 million, what would you do?
The previous,
No, that was just recently because we were looking at defeasance.
I don't remember.
Yeah, we were looking at defeasance, and then there was a question if we could defease either, 10, 8, 6 million, then there's still some money remaining for projects, and what would be the projects that might be needed, right? So that's why there was just kind
So
of a
you were
range.
working within the range, basically.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll take responsibility for defining that range because it came through conversations that we heard through the superintendent from the board. So if it was slightly incorrect, that was me, and the committee ran with it.
Okay, great. Let's see. Oh, regardless of the bond rate staying the same, et cetera, was there any discussion on the committee about splitting this into 2 bonds over a few more years or anything like that, or was that just not a consideration? I don't have an opinion really either way. I'm just wondering if that was
Phil.
considered at all.
Phil, go ahead and you can answer.
Yeah, no, we came at the total amount, and then you saw it's a pretty complex package in the sense that the committee again at a consensus recommendation, which wasn't where we started, came to like, look, we can offset the cost of finding a place for the kids in Tanna Valley. We can maximize the use of the spaces through construction by doing this all together as a single package. So that was part of it. And then again, with the defeasance, being able to chop off sort of the things that weren't part of the dependency flow, that's, I think, where those came from. All those other items are fairly dependent, which the previous committee, which we had the pleasure of working with, also came to that conclusion, and that's why it was like, that was too big to add, to get at in the last planning session, because there were so many dependencies.
And I'd add, if you were to split that, you want to try and capture the entire amount that's coming off.
Yeah.
And so then you're asking for a tax lift whenever it is you try to go after the rest.
And it was also largely trying to maximize that state match. That large middle school
yeah,
project
that's
is a
large.
huge piece of the state match. Correct.
Okay, and my last question, and I'm not sure who this goes to, if we were to eventually approve this concept or recommendation or something similar, what are the next steps of approval by the board? I mean, because there's not a lot of, I mean, this is broad, it's a lot of information, but it's not, how much
So-
detail does the board approve?
Yeah, I can run you through the Peter and I were just talking about that. So basically, the board decides like, okay, so thank you, you've accepted their proposal. You discuss it, you decide, yeah, we're gonna do that. And then you have to run a bond measure, and there's a process you do with that. And then
By November.
correct, there's some dates. So we usually see that by October-ish is a good board meetings to go through all that, get your bond resolution. You generally do a community-based bond committee that doesn't do the planning, what they do is the advocacy. And I would guess that many members of the planning committee would be happy to be advocates because it's their hard work that you're promoting. And so they talk to their neighbors about the work that they defined, they're all experts now. And then you have your vote. And there are some pieces to that. You can, if you feel very confident, you can start some early design planning piece to speed things up. But again, with your project base, I think it's pretty quick. You flow right into February. And then you decide with Corey, when do you want to sell the bonds? When do you need to start selling bonds? And that's what his expertise brings in.
How much detail does the board have on decision-making as far as detail after something's passed? I mean, honestly, I was on the board years ago when the high school was being voted on. I don't remember some of the questions I'm asking, but
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So early on, one of the first steps you do is start building what they call educational specifications. So that's working with staff, the board has to approve it, and that's where what does the buildings consist of, right? From X amount of classrooms, what size those classrooms are, and build out a full foundational framework. And then it's constant, boards getting presented to through the design iterations and getting their approvals to continue to proceed through each step of the design. We did the same thing with the elementary school projects each step of the way. So the board is integrally part of it. And then there's monthly reports that come from the owner rep firm, kind of keeping you in the loop and being able to balance questions. You guys had an advisory committee throughout the last bond as well that reported, as well to the board of how the citizens were feeling toward it.
Thank you. Mrs. Strong, I have more questions. I mean, I have comments, but I'll save them to the discussion.
Sure.
I'm taking too long.
Great question.
Well, I think another part of it being the package together was looking at Uptown Valley, because even though it looks like it's a large amount of property at Uptown Valley, a lot of that is the drain field for the septic system. So you really would not be able to construct a school by having the kids still on campus. So you'd have to find a place for the kids to leave so that you could construct on that footprint. That's where at times the committee was considering maybe property acquisition or something like that. But then there's a lot of cost when it comes to property acquisition. So that's why it made sense when the sequence is important, where you have the middle school, you build on capacity there, you can move all the kids at middle level over grade 6, 7, 8 and into that facility. Then that frees up the junior high to move the Otana Valley kids there while the construction happens. So that's kind of why the whole package all fits together. And the other thing that we hadn't talked about really much here is the fact that there is additional need for more parking for our play fields and the events. So it does make a lot of sense that where the current administration building is, you would demolish those buildings, make parking for events, and then instead of having to build a new administration building, you would be able to repurpose the junior high, which really makes a lot of sense on utilization and efficiency of the resources that we currently have.
We've done this for 25 years. I was very impressed with the committee's fiduciary stewardship of continuing to say, okay, but is there a better way to get at it? Is there a least expensive way to get at it? And that final package is very complex, but really efficient from a financial standpoint. So I was very impressed.
And then also on the timeline, Corey, can you talk about the defeasance? Because that was also part of the board's consideration, and that if they're going to decide to move forward with defeasance, it would be good to do that sooner rather than later, so that we can use that as part of the information that we're sharing with the community. The defeasance is happening, the tax rate's going to be going down for that part of the defeasance. What's the timeline for that?
If you look at the defeasance, and I'll take a step back on how that looks in the resolution. So you're working towards that November adoption. You could adopt early if you'd like to get it in October and get some more messaging out there. Once you adopt that resolution to put this ballot proposition forth to the county, that's when things warm up, right? That's when your committee kind of gets to hit the road, the volunteers. The district has to be so informational and data driven that you can't be advocating for it per se, but the volunteers can. So once you adopt that, it kind of gives them the green light to start working. That resolution will have, like the presentation that was just shared at that level will be in the resolution. And you've gone through this before where there's proceeds left over state match, and you go back to that resolution, and if it's not covered by the resolution, that's where that change of use has to be done, or that defeasance has to be done. So when you're building this next resolution, you make sure you have that flexibility and what the committee's intentions are in there, but it is still pretty high level. And there's always just a little bit of flexibility built in there. But the defeasance, Sheila's and the finance team are going to validate that levy collection for next year in November. So while right now we're budgeting, the actual validation happens in November, and if there is any kind of adjustments with the defeasance, but that defeasance most likely won't impact tax rates until 27. So you have plenty of time The defeasance isn't a lengthy process, to be honest. We did the last one in about 2 months. So it's not like a bond where we have a 6 to 9 month ramp up. So to me, I would say that the board doesn't have to rush that decision. But the earlier you decide, we can make it more comprehensive. Right now, it is isolated. This is exclusive of the defeasance. But if you'd like to see what it looks like with the defeasance, the earlier the better.
I've got a few questions, I guess, and by the way, thank you guys for all your work. And I'm for the bond, and so I want the bond to go forward. I want it to pass, but I also want to ask some critical questions because I think, to be honest, I think it's a hard sell to get 60% in this really short time. Because we're talking about doing a resolution in October and November. That means we have 3 months to sell it to the community. And so one of the things that came to mind is Mountain View. So we're doing a refresh. You know, why only a refresh? Why not a modernization? Because as a community member, you can walk into Mountain View, and Mountain View has a tile floor that's a gym/cafeteria, and it's got portables with no running water, and the kids have to go inside to use the bathroom or wash their hands, and so slapping up some paint, I feel like if we're gonna sell it, like I feel like there should be more for Mountain View included in that, and if there is does that state match increase then at that point, because it becomes a more of a modernization type thing? You mentioned the complexity of it. I think that brings maybe another hard sell, because I can understand everything that we're doing, but to sell it to the community, you have to be able to explain it in a way that everybody can understand. And when you start going down all these things, and so for me, it's like I want to do it, but how do we sell it to the community in order to get that buy-in in such a short window? And then if the bond fails, how long before we can run another bond? And so I guess, I don't know if you guys can speak to the Mountain View and then also to some of those how to sell questions. That'd be.
Phil, go ahead.
Do you guys want to speak to the Mountain View?
I'd be happy to.
Through the expert.
Tony can go.
How's that sound?
I just want Tony to have to.
There's a lot of limitations at Mountain View that didn't make sense from a financial outlook. There's only 225 kids there. So if you compare that to the amount of kids going through the middle level campus, right? That's the entire district. So, and Mountain View's on a septic system and so you can't make it any bigger, and the footprints can't go any bigger. So the amount of money it would cost to redo Mountain View is huge compared to the amount, if you look at it per student, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we talked about closing Mountain View, actually, but the community, or our committee felt like, no, this is really important. Like, there's really good culture out there, and it's important to the community, so we wanted to keep it going. But so it's kind of like, what could we do to make it better, but not put all of the money out there?
Yeah, you can't make the footprint bigger because of the well, because you'd have to put sprinklers in at that point,
septic.
right? Yeah, and the septic.
And the space, because you got the hillside.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did explore. We explored.
Buy more land.
We explored a lot of different options.
Yeah.
But it did go against our goal of keeping tax rates the same. So if we expanded that one, then it broke that goal of keeping tax rates equal. And then the match, correct me if I'm wrong, but the match to redo that just wasn't as robust as the other schools.
Gotcha.
And there was a driving issue that was your first question about the utilization in the future. You're on a slight glide path downward. Pretty even, but you currently have sufficient capacity across the district for all elementary kids if you read boundary. District doesn't need or want to rebound. That's impactful on families. We've done it, and we had to get out of town fast. But you have to do it when you bring on new school, right? There's sometimes you have to do it, so why do it when you don't? So that's what the committee struggled with. They're like, well, we don't really need more space. So you all good questions, and those were all questions the committee struggled with. And just as good stewards, they said, we just can't justify dumping all this money into a space that maybe in 10 years, another group will say it is time to close that building because it's our oldest, it's our smallest, and we've got capacity in other places, and we don't continue. So but at the same time, they felt like, but it's not fair also to tell them like, well, deal with that. So I think some of those things you talked about could be made better, and that's what that $2.9 or $2.7 million is.
Yeah.
Which was great questions, but that's what they struggled with.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Well, that, and then also, I think in all of those things, the complexity of it, the 4% rate, you've got, the defeasement, how do we go about in selling this in such a short time? Because I hate to fail, so, and I don't want to.
Well, I'll talk about the timeline. I'll talk to Corey for the second bond thing.
Yeah.
That is a standard, I would say, in our 20 plus years of doing this, the October to February dance is the standard. Your community has so much capacity to pay attention.
Yeah.
And so districts that try to talk about it for 18 months, people kind of lose track.
Yeah.
So that 3 or 4 months of real focus, and as Corey talked about, you can start it as early as October-ish, isn't bad, and you get a little more time for your committee, but it kind of works. It really does. Now, you saw the numbers. About less than half of bonds are passing. So what happens when the bond fails in February?
Yeah, so you have two opportunities in the 2026 calendar year before your tax rate drops off. And then, so right now it's a replacement bond, right? You get to use different language. If you make those 2 attempts in 26 and they're not successful, and now you're trying again in 27, or you pause, it's no longer a replacement bond. Tax rates have gone down. Now you're asking for people who would like to get used to this lower amount to pay a higher amount. I wouldn't say there's any data out there that actually shows that's easier or harder, to be frank. The data is just people need to be connected to your project. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that's changed over time since your last bond is you have 28 people on this committee that are going to be really vocal, but you'll see these new grassroots social media driven models of getting information out there, and that can be for and against you. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, people are able to do a lot more of education information, whether it's now Facebook or other social media streams. And the district can pump out a lot of social media posts that are factual in nature, but as this committee's out there and the volunteers, they can actually share a lot of information and get out there quickly. It's also easy for disinformation to get spread as well. But I would say that this is right on schedule. If not, there's districts right now that are considering measures that haven't even gotten to the numbers yet. They're still thinking about February, and they'll be working this summer on it. So I think you're right on schedule, right on time, but it really takes a lot of the volunteers folks to take it and run with it.
And Corey, what are the dates? There's February. What are the choices to run?
So basically, if you're looking at this model, 4 months are February, April, August, and November.
Okay.
The only time we see somebody go February then straight to April is if you're at 59%. You just need a little bit more. And after you do that first election, that you haven't done an election for a few years, after you do that, you have a whole bunch of data. Which neighborhoods were you struggling to get the vote out? Which neighborhoods supported it? So now you have something to roll with. If that first one is 56%, then you just take a pause and say, do we need more time? And then you have August or November. Nobody really picks August ever because it's so critical to have support from your educational leaders in your district, and they're taking a much deserved break. So August is the most horrible success percentage out there. So really your options would be February with a plan B of April and or November before the tax rate drops off.
Do you have any experience with our city is considering raising property taxes right now? Do you have any experience how that affects bonds or levies if the city raises?
We kind of got like a rock, paper, scissors thing that's out there, schools beat hospitals, but fire districts beat schools. So when we compare measures, it's not optimal when other folks are considering things, but we have seen things succeed at the same time. It depends, as I mentioned before, it depends on how much people connect with your projects. And that's why it's different when the board says, we've determined we're going to do these projects and push it out, versus the community pushing it to the board for consideration. That's really one of the game changers for support we've seen out there, is they're community driven instead of top down driven.
I'll give you two examples of two districts that didn't pass the first time, and not most districts assume they're going to maybe need 2 runs at it. At both board meetings, the community came and they were upset that it didn't pass, and they really pushed the board and said, "You don't change the plan. The plan is right. Let's get at getting it passed differently." And then both those districts have passed the second time. And I think that's the testament to a community-based committee bringing it to you, is that the plan is solid. So it's just about how do you get at your community to pass it. Districts that try to start playing darts to figure out what someone will pass, it usually just sort of spins and devolves into something. And then you don't have the right stuff. That connection is lost.
Yeah.
I feel like the other thing you share is, you kept telling me like how engaged the community members were, and there was majority community members, and just that, I mean, maybe you can just share that with the board.
Yes, and yes. I mean, it's important that, it's not a committee made up of principals, teachers, and district office staff. Like, that's kind of thing. So we had good community members. They had really, they had us on our heels often, really great questions, like really complex questions, really smart questions. And we had to go back to the drawing board multiple times because we brought data, and they're like, okay, like, what about this, what about this? So we feel like it's again, I don't see the complexity as a negative. I see it as a refinement. It is really tight and refined approach that is perfect for your committee. I've had the pleasure of being around you for quite a few years, and I really do feel like this is the perfect set of projects. And then with getting the state match of almost 50 cents on the dollar, it's just like districts would kill for this opportunity, quite honestly.
And to add to that, you and I were talking before the meeting, your citizens are paying that stat tax regardless.
It's their money.
Regardless of if you run this or not, that tax will be paid.
Yeah.
So, and this isn't me trying to sell you to run this bond, is saying that to get that, would it be nice to get it back?
$44 million if your community's tax dollars are sitting at OSPI. How about we get it back?
Because every year these bonds aren't passing, and we have this 300 to 600 million earmarked for SCAP, and as schools haven't been passing bonds, the state just sweeps it into the rainy day fund. So one of our comments lately has been, do you want that back? And I don't work with many schools that get this much. I've been working with, we're doing Chelan down the way, and I think it gets 7 million out of 72. So to me, this is a huge, I haven't seen a number this large for a while, from a ratio perspective.
And part of that is your district's done a really good job with the buildings you have, and you haven't needed to rebuild for a while. So now it's your time. So it's all, like I said, the puzzle pieces really are lining up pretty well.
Have you seen school boards? So I look at like the defeasance of the current funds as an opportunity to give back to our people so that we can get more buy-in on this bond, and I think if they see that, I think it gives them the ability to trust that we're doing right by them. How have you seen defeasance processes happen in school boards, and how did those school boards communicate that to the community?
There's only been one defeasance in the last 15 years. So we did IFRADA last year as a defeasance. And we've seen defeasance in other governmental entities, but that was maybe 10 years ago. So it's rare ground. For the most part, schools out there are struggling to do projects and running out of money, let alone adjusting and pivoting and having resources remaining of state match. So it's a rare situation, but IFRADA came to the conclusion we would rather defease money and ask for a little bit more later and have the voters approve it than to absorb it.
Yeah.
So that was their decision. Will it result in an approved bond that they're going to run in 27? We don't know yet. But that was their end decision making. Most districts, I've done probably 6 defeasance presentations. We've only done it one time. So I've been to 6 different schools out of the 120 we work with, and everyone has been let's just redesignate those funds. So I can see the perspective of, I'm going to give this back to you rather than just utilize it, or a combination of the two, because I think there is some goodwill there and there's some stewardship.
Any more questions for this group?
Yes. In Tony and Natalie's presentation, there was a bullet near the beginning that talked about in the slide that the committee conducted 6 work sessions over 8 months, studied facility education, so on and so forth. And then the last bullet is included consideration of community's responses to recommendations. Can anybody speak to that a little bit more specifically?
Sure. Since I wrote it, I'll tell you what I think it means, and then we'll present to you guys.
Sure.
Color. We don't always bring bond rates to a planning committee. Sometimes their job is just to define the project. It's grounded in program and data. Here you go. Go do your good work, board. And then Corey comes in fresh and they talk about it. In this case, we actually brought those. They asked again, what's it going to cost? What's the impact on homeowners? We got to know before we finalize. So we brought that information in, and Corey was great. He did a couple of versions for us that let them get a sense of impact. So then they said, okay, all right. So they kind of chewed on that for a couple of meetings and said, no, this doesn't deter us. We still think this is right. So that was what that's.
I see.
Yeah.
It's the community members on the committee that you were gauging, not the overall. I thought
we did not do it. No, we did not do it like a thought exchange or something like that.
Okay, I thought I was missing something. No. That makes more sense to me now.
Clearly included that graph. Yeah. And you know, you can do that throughout the planning process. You can do it afterwards. But the committee really chewed on that and felt that no, this is very palatable.
Yeah. To the range of $2 to $6 million to utilize from the remaining bond proceeds, and then that would potentially mean we would defease part and use part. Was there any discussion, and I'm specifically curious of the community members, of the wisdom, the goodwill, sort of to James's point, was there any sort of debate or discussion about that item and how that impacts the passability of this proposal? And if you aren't prepared to answer that question, because Peter said at the beginning we're not allowed to ask you questions, I'm fine with that, but that is a question that, if was not discussed, would be something that I would be interested in the community, the committee deliberating on and bringing back to the board for our further consideration.
So
and that's speaking for myself only, not a directive of the entire board.
So is your question, did we consider defeasement or not?
No, my question is this. I'm a little bit like James, but I'm going to say it like this. I'm interested in passing a bond resolution that has the chance of passing. And I'm not as concerned about the complexity. I'm speaking now with my comments, but there's a question.
It's a good discussion.
This is like I'm in court now. No, I don't do that anymore. No, what I guess I'm trying to say, here's where I'm coming from. I'm interested in passing a bond resolution that can pass. I don't think anybody disagrees with. I mean, you know, everybody's nodding their heads. Of course, we're not going to waste everybody's time, but I know the committee member. I know most of the committee members that are from the community, and I know that they are well versed in the consternation of some of the community relative to the board's decision to amend the 2019 bond resolution and utilize some of those proceeds. And so I'm really grateful for the work that was done to, hey, consider the 2 to 6, but I'm interested in the committee's opinions about whether or not that's wise to do or not. I get the wisdom, I get the math, I get the financial part, but I'm talking about the passability part of it. And maybe that wasn't part of the discussion, but if it wasn't part of the discussion, I would, because to Phil's point, a lot of smart people who I have a great deal of respect for, I would love their opinion about this for my consideration and our consideration.
Yeah, we did talk about it quite a bit, and there was a lot of different opinions, as you guys all know, and even looking across the board, you guys have debated this too. Some people look at it and say, hey, I voted for 2 schools and we did that, I want some of that back. And others are like, you did that and you saved money, you can keep it. So there was a lot of talk of that public perception and going after those voters now, and trust is part of that conversation, tax rates are part of that conversation, even smart use of money. We're giving back, what is that original bond, 0.5%, 0.7, 0.8? So we're giving back money we borrowed at 0.8 to then ask for it back at 4.3. Why would you pay off your lowest credit card to, or refinance your house at a higher rate? So there was a lot of that conversation, but it ultimately, from the committee, from a lot of us, that comes back to you guys. So we didn't spend a lot of time, we didn't have a solution for you. It was something that was always in the background, and that was always the part of it of, well, what's the board gonna do? Do we use it? Do we not use it? Do we make it part of the recommendation? Do we not? And how will that public perception play off with the voters? So I think we had a lot of the exact same opinions, thoughts, questions, and ultimately, what do we do?
But the consensus of the group was to spend 4.9 of the remaining bond proceeds as part of this. I
don't think we had that decision.
It wasn't.
I felt like we were told, if you were going to spend 2 to 6, what would you spend it on?
Correct. Thank you.
We didn't have the decision of not spending it.
Okay.
We were just kind of making a recommendation.
We were answering the question brought to us by the board.
Okay.
Because the board's our understanding was, wait till your plan is finalized. So if we do spend any of this money, it's against a plan. It's not just what we want. So we finished the plan, and then we brought that question forward. And I would say that the committee felt comfortable and glad on 2 points. One, the math works with or without. So you can fit underneath. You can achieve the flat rate without the 4.9, barely. And you can fit comfortably under it with it. So it didn't change, it didn't need to change the recommendation one way or the other. And secondly, there was a good feeling, I think, about it was a split. It wasn't all of it and it wasn't none of it. So that because everybody was, I see some heads nodding, because everybody had different opinions.
It's representative of, my commentary is it's representative of the community forums that we had.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad.
I mean, that's a good
validation.
that's that's an opinion of mine.
And to Natalie's point, we weren't definitively saying you. Now, if it would have been different if the whole package wasn't possible without it, because then the committee would have had to make a decision. But we didn't have to come back.
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah. I appreciate the last clarification that if we removed that piece out of the equation, we could still do this project.
You will ask. Now goes to Corey. I'm going to toss back to what Corey said earlier. The math is a little different, but at the end of the day, it sorts out the same for the tax rate.
Up front, it's going to be very similar in tax rate. This all goes back to 2038.
Yeah.
What's going to be the step down? So this is fractionally different. 4 million out of 94 million is going to push it some pennies, but it's not going to significantly change the plan. But we can run it different ways. We can run the full defeasance. We can run partial. So we're at the ready to run any.
He's taking notes over here.
No, it's okay. And I'm sorry if I'm asking an unfair question. I'm sorry if I'm asking an unfair question or an impossible question, because it is sort of an impossible question. But anyway, the rest is part of my comments, so I'm going to just leave it at that.
Tony Natalie said it right. We send it back to the board with
I'm going to comment.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I would say the board already approved to spend some of the money, right? So as a community member, when we were told, okay, if you wanted to spend 2 to 6 more, in my head, and maybe Peter and other board members or community members can chime in, but we were already spending the money, like it's already been spent. So the defeasance decision was already made in some ways as soon as we started spending money that wasn't at Apple Valley in some of you. And
That doesn't make it any more comfortable for this board member. I mean, in reply to that, just because I hear that, and since I've been reading this since last Friday, that's what I've been struggling.
You asked for.
That's what I've been struggling with, because of course I'm doing the complete debate in my own head about just what you're saying.
You asked for just our comments as committee members, and I do have one little thought, because I helped run that last bond, well, the last 2 bonds I helped run, and I chaired the last levy. what if, so we got to sell, it's a sales pitch, right, to the public. So what if we actually had a bullet point in the sales pitch of, if there is savings, because you want to encourage the district to save money in the project. If there is savings, we will split that 50-50 between giving it back and letting the district utilize it. So actually addressing it, because that's the problem. It wasn't in that last bond. So there was savings, and now what do we do? And everyone's got different opinions. But actually, do you state that with, let's encourage the district to save money and be good stewards in this project, because we've built in cushions and inflations and escalations, and if they can do it, it gets split 50-50 back with the voter and the district. Just an idea. You asked
Thank
for
you,
opinions.
Director Thorner. You've now reopened the conversations we had. That's it. No,
I'm sorry, because I could, I mean,
it's indicative.
but I could talk about this for an hour. I want to sit here and debate my good friend, Mr. Farina.
Just an idea.
Well, no, I know that, but yeah, again, I'm going to get back. I'll save my rebuttal to your mark.
Thank you. Because some of these things are branching into when we get to discussion. If you have questions for the presenters, please ask your questions to the presenters. There's a separate section where we can discuss these things. So
Thank you,
Any
guys.
more questions for the presenters? Okay, good discussion. No good questions. I'll say that much. They're much appreciated because they are things that need to be aired out. So I thank you for that. All right, we're going to move on in the agenda. Thank you. Very good. All right, next we go to item 7 on the agenda, public comment for non-discussion agenda items. Are we there?
No one signed in.
No one signed in, okay. Next we go to action items, number 8, approval of board meeting minutes. If anyone has any questions about it, this is the time to ask. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the June 24th board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion. We'll go ahead and vote on the board meeting minutes from June 24th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Next, we have approval of resolutions. Update, appointment of investment officer, auditing officer, signatory of warrant registers. These are not new items. I think these
This
come
is
up, but we have new information on them.
This is the resolution that will approve the signatures for the district, which are Peter Finch, Ryan McDaniel, and Stacy Drake. So the substantive part here is that it's removing Joe Conley and adding Ryan McDaniel.
Correct. So, okay, thank you. All right, anyone care to make a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and update the appointment of investment officer, auditing officer, and signatory of warrant register. Now that we have a motion, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. All right, now we get to discussion items. Where we were.
Sorry, everybody.
No, that's okay. That's all right. Those things need to be said. Now this is a place for us to discuss these items. So, go ahead. Mr.
Well,
Cornell.
let me just to answer Mr. Farina just a second, and listen, all ideas are good ideas, and I appreciate that. I think where and Tony, you know this from when we did the Apple Valley and Summit View bond is that in these bond resolutions is kind of standard language in it that says that or other projects that are approved by the board. Clearly, number one is that I like the idea that you propose, or an idea that you propose, that if the board, if the school district is able to save money, this is what is going to happen, and that be part of the actual bond resolution. The question is whether or not we can legally put that in the resolution. I don't know. That would be a question for bond legal counsel to put. I like something like that because what frustrated me about the whole process that we went through was when we said we're going to build Apple Valley and Summit View. That was the whole pitch. We're going to do this, nothing more, nothing less, and it's ended up being more to the district's favor by the way, to Natalie's point. I mean, you know, and that, and even when we were going through the process of like, okay, well, I would have spirited debates with my good friend, Mr. Strong, who wanted me to compromise my position, but we would have spirited conversation about a very good discussion about the wisdom of using the money and the savings that it has, and even some of that is woven within this plan, which I like. I feel much better that this plan, which I think is really good, by the way, and I really appreciate all of the committee's efforts. I like this a lot. I'm even happier that to learn that we could do it even without utilization of the remaining bond proceeds. That's not to say that I've made up my mind about using $4.9 million under the, what I would say, Natalie's approach of, well, you've already spent the money, you've done a pretty good job, I think we can sell that. I absolutely feel that we've done a really good job and done a lot of really great things for our school system and our school district and our infrastructure. Those have been good. Those have been good decisions that it would be hard to quantify exactly how much money we have saved because we were able to do those projects without that, rather than waiting. But James's point resonates also with me, which is all of this is there's a lot to explain about that, and you know, but I also would say that I have faith in the people of this community that would take that information and take it under consideration. So I don't have a great answer on the, and it really, I have a great answer on the proposal. Love it. Makes a lot of sense. I think it's awesome. It's a lot different than I had envisioned it might turn out. And when I read all of this whole thing, I was enthralled. I'm going to read it again because it was just, I wanted to hear the discussion. It's just first rate. So I just think it's terrific, and I'm grateful for that. The piece that again, I'm just real uncomfortable of is this $4.9 million utilization. That's the piece that I'm just it just makes me uncomfortable.
I have a couple of comments
Yeah.
too.
Thank you for letting me ramble.
That's okay. That's all right. This is the place to do that. Number one, one of the things that I was most happy with this plan is that really for years we have, and you've been on here with me longer than we've wrestled with what to do with the mid-level campus, you know, and this is I think a good solid plan that addresses that. And I also like that, I don't know who brought it up, the idea of demoing the whole admin area and coming up with some parking instead of parking on the street after football games where kids are crossing the street back and forth and families with little kids. I think that's a great idea and great intuition to think about those things. So it's good. Mr. Wolcott brought up something a while ago, and I just kind of wanted to address that a little bit. So I think it was either you or somebody else brought up the question, getting the message out to the community. Well, if I recall, the last time around, we did a series of community forums, which I think is a great tool for us to use. This gives the community a chance to interact directly with us and us to hear them. Sometimes we can talk directly back. So I think, you know, whatever we wind up doing, I think that's going to be a piece of it because, again, that draws the community in. It gives them a chance to react to what happens if we have leftover funds. You know, let's address it up early. Let's have a plan for that. And I like the idea of doing it early this time and making it fundamentally clear what's going to happen, whether it's a 50-50 split or we identify without even a cost particular items that need to be addressed regardless at some point down the road. If there are funds left over and a portion of that could be used to address critical items which have already been pre-identified, that's great. But I think the whole point of it all is just having a plan of action that's clear and communicated to everybody so that there is no doubt left over. So those two things stood out to me, at least especially the mid-level campus. I really like what the planning is for that. And I do want to compliment, I sat in on a lot of the meetings, I was there, and just listening to the community involvement was just really rewarding because for two reasons. Number one, we had a lot of input from a lot of people and people were listening. And then number two, we had great facilitators to help move things along to get us to a point of conclusion without dragging this on forever and ever. I think it was a well-prepared product and a lot went into it and it just shows in the end. So I'm going to stop talking. I will ramble on. I'm going to turn it over to anyone else who has comments or, I mean, this is the point where we discuss here with ourselves what we're thinking. So anybody? Mr. Kephart?
I do, but I don't know if Joel wants to talk.
Yeah, okay. No, I just, a lot of the same things that you've said, Mark. If we do anything with a bond or levy, I would like to see a special note attached. This is how excess funds or funds that come under the budget are used, so that it's clarified, it's clear, and we all understand its purpose. I do also want to just say thank you to the committee for meeting. It was so creative, hardworking, thoughtful. You guys really spent so much time putting everything together. And it strikes me how different the conversation evolved over those months of just what could be and really dreaming about the best interest for West Valley. And I especially enjoyed the humility and the sacrifice in those conversations where people didn't put their own wants above everybody else. It was always what's best for the community, and that shined through. I think in the long term, our next long-term facility plan really does need to address what do we do with Mountain View? What is the goal? What is the direction? We've struggled with that in conversations. How much money to pour into Mountain View and what's the best use of it? And the reality is we just don't know what the future will hold for it, but we should have an answer. We should have a direction. We should plan for that. And then I think as we talk about defeasement, as all of those things, Michael, I'm on the same board with you. The $4 billion makes me uneasy. We can look at all sorts of ways in which we've saved money, the best use of money, but it comes down to an issue of just, it's not my money. I always struggle with that. I can't decide how to spend money that's not mine. And that's how I always feel about money that is not identified. I recognize that it costs more to give it back when we look at all the things that we could use it for. Except that I think it costs the most important thing, which is trust. If it's not my money, I don't have the right to delineate where it goes. And so those are just the thoughts of where I'm at with it.
I probably agree with that. I think it is good math to use the 4.9 million now, but what you can't quantify is the goodwill that it buys to defease the 11 million at this point, because I do think that that's going to buy a lot more goodwill and trust from the community, and I think in the long run that's going to be better math, because if we go forward, I think the 4.9 million, whether you use 4.9 or you use 11 million, I think you lose that goodwill. And so I think in the long term, the bond fails, it's going to cost even more because we're going to have to run the bond at a later date. And so I would be for this, but I think my thought is to defease the full amount. And like he said, it's rare ground, right? You know, and that's going to buy some attention from the community that we are walking on rare ground. I'd like to look more into Afreda and just to kind of see what happened with that. But I think the plan is great. There are maybe just, I get the Mountain View, what do you do with it? But I think we do need to have a plan for it of like in 2038, it's going to be demolished, and this is the plan that we're going to look towards. Because I think people ask those questions, like people have said, like it's a special school, right? So for those that have had their families out there, right? It's out there in the outskirts and stuff, and so people want to know why is it special, and what are we going to do with it? And that's going to be part of, I think, the people buying into this bond, is that if we know what is the plan. for Mountain View, because it's for our future kids. So that's my thoughts.
I've got more if you don't.
I've got a little bit. Again, I want to reiterate, I keep looking at you two. Is there anybody else here?
Oh, yeah, there's,
Thank you. I keep looking over there, but thank you all that were on the committee, because it's a great plan, and I love all the parts of it. And it's no secret that before I ran for the board that I was for defeasing the money because there wasn't a lot of clarity. The jury's still out a little bit for me on this, because the final decision of the board was to, spend 13 and defease 6. So right now I'm at the point where I think because of that decision, more or less a decision after those forums, at minimum we have to defease at 6. So I'm pretty strong on that. The other I haven't totally decided yet. I've got to think it through a lot more looking at this, but I wrote down before this, I think we need to offer a plan that shows that we value the community's money, we keep our word, and we care for students and our facilities. And I think that's really important, and I think this plan shows that we care for our students and facilities. I think valuing their money to keep it the same as before. But I am concerned about the passability, because, and I know there's the other side of the coin, I totally get that, but I had so many people say, because of that issue, I'm never voting for a bond again, and I know there's other people that are going, yeah, but look at the dollars, look at the money, and so I understand there's both sides of that. My whole thinking is just really the passability, because I don't want to get out there and go, well, we're going to use all the money, we're not going to defease anything, but we want you to pass this, so go. I'm a little concerned about the passability. But again, I'm sort of like Mr. Dorner, I haven't fully made up my mind on amounts.
So I guess I'll offer my thoughts here. Like most of you guys, I haven't totally made up my mind, but I am kind of leaning one way versus the other, and it's a little different for reasons that you explained. I think in many cases there's no time like the present for some of these things that we need. I go back to just basic math. It's going to cost us more to wait, and I think there's an element of saying to ourselves, we generate goodwill by being wise stewards of the money and figuring out what is best to do with it. That's why we're here. Is we were brought up here to make these kind of decisions. I think we do it with community involvement. I think we talk to the community. I mean, if we get an overwhelming group, an overwhelming majority that says, no, we want it all back, that's great. But that's not what really happened last time. I think it was actually tilted the other way. Probably a little bit more of the community said, it's wise to use the money now before these things become prohibitively expensive, which is what we're running into. The other thing is, I just have this belief, and maybe it's just too basic in my mind, but when we talk about bonds and how much it costs to run them, the last bonds were high, but now we're talking about another $70 or $80 million that we are asking the community to spend. I think if we're talking about what really matters to them most is really how much are they going to have to come out of their pockets and pay again or now. We're already talking about just keeping things level without making any real changes. But if we start raising the price or things start to go up by delaying, and they're going to cost us more just 2 or 3 years down the road, or even as much as 30% more, it's going to look kind of, I don't know. I just feel like we wouldn't be doing the best possible job. I think it's wise to think it through thoroughly, figure it out, get a lot of community input. And there's many times I'll talk to some of my friends and ask them, what do you think about this? Or what did you think when this happened? Some of them are afraid to venture their thoughts with me. Others just simply say flat out what they think. And I will say that in my mind, the scales are tipped toward a little bit more, use the money wisely, use it now for the things that we know we need. I mean, look at some of the things that we're talking about. Pipes being repaired, asphalt and safety issues. Those are things that matter to people when we talk about spending their money wisely. Mm-hmm. And if we don't do it now, when we wait and say, you know what, 4 years, okay, this cost us 4 million before, but now it's 6 or 7 million. Have we really gained goodwill by doing that? I don't know. I'm not saying we have or haven't. I'm saying I don't know because I can't make that judgment just yet in my mind. One thing is for sure, for me, my family, as a taxpayer, as someone who pays for some of the things the school district uses, I don't want to pay more just because I think I'm gaining something from my neighbor here, and that it's important to me. Sure it is, but again, I think at the same time, it's wise to do what we can for the least amount of money, for the greatest maximum benefit of the students and the community in general. It's a tough decision to make, but I kind of lean that way, and I'm hoping that if we go this route and we have some more community forums, we're not afraid to get that kind of input and feedback back from the community. We need to know what they really think. I really like the clause of putting something in there that says what we're going to do if there's leftover money, because that wasn't clear the last time. This time we make it clear, and if the community says by an overwhelming tone, no, all the money should be the fees back, I can live with that. But it wasn't clear then, and I'm not so sure we would be wise to just say, hey, I'm going to defease all this money back when we've got, some critical projects identified that need to be taken care of right now. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling too, because I can go on and on. But those are my feelings about some of those things.
What would it look like timeline to set up a community forum and begin? Because honestly, like if we're going to do this bond, like
I agree with something I forgot who said about not being a little bit too early, but the community forums can be set up in rather quick order. It's not like it takes us months to plan. We could do it in a couple of weeks and just set it up and just pick a location and invite as many people. It doesn't have to be just one forum either. We could do a couple of them or 3, whatever we feel is appropriate to get the maximum input. But I think that is one option. There's other ways of doing some of those things too, but I think that's a good one because we get to hear directly back and forth in front of us.
So would it be a resolution October the earliest, and then at that point we would set up for community forums?
Well, we can do it
The bond resolution would typically take place in November.
Yes.
And so to kind of reverse engineer back because I have my calendar out right now because I was on the same wavelength as you on the timeline. But, bond council needs to know what, we need to direct Peter to work with bond council to have a resolution for the board to pass in probably early October, so that in November we could pass the bond resolution. So let's just say that October 10th, which is a Friday, is about a month before that resolution would have to be. So if we were to do some community forums, it probably makes sense to do them in September, when we're back in school and people are talking about school so that, we could start them in August too, but I'm just thinking that September would be the month to be gathering that information. I think also, though, maybe I'm hearing our discussion wrong, but I think I hear that the board, so we got 2 different things. We have the proposal from the committee of here's the bond that we would like you to run. Now that does have a $4.9 million component in it for utilization of remaining bond proceeds. However, we just heard that we could still do it without. Mm-hmm. So the bond resolution, I'm not saying we should turn bond council loose on this sooner rather than later. I don't think that's the debate.
Right.
I think the debate more is
what to do with
the remaining bond proceeds at this point. Mm-hmm. I think that's more of they're 2 separate issues, and they're 2 separate resolutions, and the running of the bond is really mutually exclusive of the defeasance. The defeasance helps us potentially with the goodwill promotion of the bond, which is why we would want to have some decision about that in the early-ish fall, so that that would springboard the bond campaign. If I'm just saying that out loud. If I'm saying that out loud, right? I think that's the order of operations.
I agree. I mean, I'm hearing that. I just think that the way that the plan was put together, they're a bit interwoven in there. And yes, we could, and maybe we should. I don't know. I'm just saying that it seems to be a partial component of the whole plan to do something like that. And the question to me is, I guess another question, has the community have they moved on from some of these issues that we can continue to raise? I mean, I look at the football field, and first I was worried that people wouldn't really adapt to it or really like it, but I've heard nothing but positive comments about it. And there's a lot of other projects that we have done some of these things with some of that money that just clearly makes sense. I say that in the sense of not that we shouldn't consider them separately. I just want to make sure that if we do separate them, that we're able to link them back together, because they're kind of tied. We're trying to get that 1-2 punch, right?
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that we have these community forums in September. I'm saying September, but having them in September and then with the idea of, late October, early November, where we're passing the bond resolution. At that point, we will know, based upon those community forums and then our further discussion, what way we're going to go on the defeasance to again springboard to springboard the bond campaign. That's what I'm trying to say is yes, they are connected, but what I think I hear the five of us saying is we like this proposal from the committee. It's about a $4.9 million piece, though, that does impact the bond resolution a little bit, but not much, in the actual wording that we have to pass. There's two resolutions, defeasance resolution, bond resolution, but they have connectivity to them for the campaign and the goodwill and the gesturing but to your point, I think that's the reason. You might be right. I'd like to take the temperature of the community about this issue, because maybe now that they see what we have done, they're like, maybe some people's minds have changed about this. Maybe some people feel better about that. I do think a question that I would be interested in knowing sooner rather than later from bond legal counsel, from our legal counsel that would write the bond, is can we put in this bit about the 50-50, or can we put in something about can we put in additional language other than and other projects authorized by the board? Because my sense is we can't, but we need somebody that actually knows what they're talking about to answer that question. My sense is we're not going to. I have a feeling our legal counsel is going to tell us that's a bad idea, and it'll be well reasoned. But we need the district's lawyers to tell us that, not me.
I agree with you. I like your logic on all of that stuff, the way you just clarified that. I do wish, I'll put it like that there was some way to put some language in there, maybe a little non-specific, where we don't have to be 50-50 or something, but a clarification that spells out to the community, because that option was always there before, right? That the board could say there's leftover money from that. The board, we had to vote on it.
Yeah, it was just the same language, or other projects approved by the board, which was the opener for how we amended the bond resolution. And I think what Mr. Farina is suggesting is that we literally put, and what I hear is some traction from the other board members is that would be a really good thing to put in.
Yes,
if we can.
Yeah.
if we can.
I
but-
think, or to clarify that statement that's already in there.
Yeah.
That's what I was
don't
gonna
think-
say.
I don't think you're gonna see this happen again, really, because we're talking 59 million, and there was almost
Yeah.
a whole other school left over, right? So it was this huge number. Typically, it's gonna be not that much left over, and so that phrase that's already in there, no one thinks about. I mean, this is a one-time
Right.
thing that happened, and I think it was a huge dollar amount, and it became a big issue. And you've heard my opinions on it.
Right. I just, yeah.
But I don't know, I think if you're selling it, I mean, you can sell it like, yeah, and the school can use leftover money. I mean, I don't know how much you're gonna.
The problem is, this gets to the whole heart of the matter of why this was so frustrating to me from the very beginning. I thought it was very clear when we sold this in 2019 relative to the bond. We're bringing up the same conversation. And what we're trying to do is memorialize the promise. And that's effectively what you're saying, or what we're trying to say. And I don't know what that exactly looks like. And this is the intersection between, I want to ensure, I believe it's important to ensure that we follow through with what we say we're going to do. And again, there's a legal issue that has to be addressed in that process. And then there is the issue of, okay, we are where we are right now, and what are we going to do about it?
So,
Or how are we going to solve the issue?
I think sorry, Mr. Wolcott was just touching on a point I was about to say, and that is, I think one of the things that we didn't do well the first time around was to highlight that particular section. And again, just making clear to the community, okay, for those of you who were around the first time or last time around, you remember what happened. We had this amount of money. Absolutely correct. We had no way, and that was part of the big problem in my mind, is we had no inkling at all that there was going to be that much money left over. I mean, I just think who wouldn't think that that's a wise thing to do is to use some of that for these critical projects that would cost us more later. Okay, that being said, I'm not going to rehash that whole issue again with you, Mr. Thorne. I know we discussed that
because you're not going to
infinitum,
because the bottom line is you're not going to change my mind.
I know it. No,
based
that's
upon
okay.
what was said in 2019, because
Yeah.
I was a part of that.
Okay, that's fine. I totally agree with you. That's fine. I'm just saying, if I wasn't a part of that promise that was made, but I don't want to go back and retrace that. What has happened has happened. My point is, in this new, whatever we come up with, this new process, this new resolution, I just think it needs to be spelled out. Now, what that language looked like in terms of spelling it out, I don't know.
I think that's where it comes to council.
Yeah, I think we have our council spell that out so that it's clear to the community. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. This is one option, this is another option. But the community forum should help us define what that should be, because we asked them at that point, how do you feel about if there's, I don't know what legal counsel is going to sell us, but I'm going to just give you a range, for example. If there's $10 million left, can we use some of that money, or can we use a portion of that money for critical work items, or does it have to be a higher dollar amount? I don't know what it would look like, but if we could come up with something that's manageable or something that the community better understands, at least it would be out there in more clear terms than it was the last time.
Go ahead.
Would a to-do item then to be, Peter, if you just contact the legal counsel on this, and I think that will get the question
We'll find
answered
out.
for
That's the
legal
big
wording.
question that we need to know.
And then the next follow-up would be really discussion on what to do with the defeasance, I think. Is that, am I correct?
And yes, and just so you know, I don't want to get hung up on that, because I agree wholeheartedly. That's probably once in a lifetime that we're going to have that kind of money left over. It's just, that was just a fluke that things worked out the way they did. Just one thing after another connected to bring us to that point. But I wasn't on the board then, and Mr. Thorne, you probably were, we go back to the prior bond, or when it was passed, it seems to me that there was some remembrance of what happened with the high school. There was leftover money, it wasn't spent the way the community liked, and so I don't even know how that was addressed back then. But I want to say,
I wasn't on the board then. But
you weren't? Okay, but
no.
you heard about it though.
Yeah, but it was the same. But it was the same. It was the same thing. The board from my understanding, the board operated legally under the clause of there were remaining proceeds from the high school project, and then the board went through a similar process of identifying needs, and it utilized those needs, and the community had a disagreement about it, and some were upset about how those monies were used, and that stalled our efforts on 2 bond issues that, while I was on the board, that failed until we then got the Apple Valley and Summitview, which was that. And I just want to clarify that the answer that I'm seeking from our council is about what can we put in the resolution about defeasance up front. Not necessarily, I'm not necessarily married to like it has to be 50. I'm just saying, can the resolution even address that specific issue? That's what I'm asking. And then in terms of the defeasance issue, I do think I do support the idea of taking the community's temperature and hearing from the community through community forums in the early fall to help. That will help me figure out where I'm at on the, do we defease it all? Do we, okay, we are where we are, and are we going to defease part and use 4 point? That'll help me. That'll help me. It'll be a piece as I continue to think about this a lot.
So James, I think to answer your question is, have that discussion after these community forums, so that we have more information and kind of that pulse of the community.
I struggle with the timing on the community forum though.
Well, when do you want to do it?
I think it should be sooner, because I think if you're going to make that decision, you're making it so close to when you're doing the bond resolution, and I think it would be beneficial if we were to vote to defease all the funds. I think it would be beneficial to have a little bit of space in there so we can communicate that to the community that it's, and so I know August is like a horrible time, right?
That's
everybody's
again,
going. There's no good time.
Yeah, that's why I'm suggesting September. But I mean, we could do it tomorrow, as far as I'm concerned. We could have as many of them as we want, starting right away. I mean,
is there an alternate way other than a community forum to gauge the temperature?
You can do surveys. We used to have something called Survey Monkey or something like that, but I think they're not as effective as the community live forums are. But it's up to the board to decide. One more point I want to make about timing. I agree with Mr. Thorner here about the timing being closer in September, because it's closer to the actual date you want to do things. If you do it, in my opinion, based on what I heard also, you do it too far out, it's kind of like people... You lose them a little bit. It's like if you write a document, my trainers always told me, get your point out in the first 2 or 3 sentences, because if you have a full page or 5 pages, you're going to start to lose them after a while. Same concept here, is if we do it too early, you might start the discussion, but you also may start something more than we want. We want to focus on these 2 issues in particular, I think, and if we narrow the focus and keep the timing close, I think we're going to have a better chance of getting what we want. That's just my opinion.
That makes sense.
What about if we were to commit to making a decision about defeasance by September 30th after having some community input, and then by the end of October that we would have the bond resolution completed?
September 30th, the 4th Tuesday?
September 30th is the 5th Tuesday. I'm just choosing the end of the month. There's no magic day, except I'm just saying by the end of September we're gonna have clarity on that as a springboard to the campaign, that we would then pass a bond resolution in probably at the business meeting on October 28th. Assuming that that's correct with the timing for the county auditor's office for the election.
Yeah, you're fine.
So just to make sure I haven't been brain dead here, we're suggesting having forums on the bond issue.
On the defeasement of funds?
Well, you could do both.
Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting.
I mean, Mark,
I'm suggesting.
I'm just thinking, do we really want to rehash that?
On what?
That's a good question.
The bond defeasance, do we really want to rehash that?
Well,
we know where people were, or
Well-
some of us disagree on where they were, so.
Okay. First of all, I think the community forums are to try to gauge where the community's at on defeasance only. I think that we have a community. I love how this was said. This proposal is a community-generated proposal for the bond. It's not a board-generated proposal. So I think we all like the community-generated proposal for the bond. The issue is the 4.9 million. So the community forums are about, at least in my mind, are about, okay, here's what we did. And we're about a year later from these projects that we did. Here's where we are right now. The board has received a proposal from the Long Range Facilities Committee, and here it is. We intend to act on that. We intend to act on that in the form of a bond resolution. Here's this. What is your feeling, community, about us using 4.9, defeasing it all, defeasing some other amount, keeping a little bit? What is your feeling about that? We don't have to do it. I'll make that decision on my own without the community, but there is something that I like about asking them, at least getting some temperature on that. I would appreciate that. But if we don't want to do that, I'm okay with that too. And I'll vote the best I can on it.
I think kind of after hearing it and you talk, I think I would be more for a community forum in regards to the bond, and the defeasement is maybe a part of the conversation, but it's not the conversation, I guess. You know, I think the community forum becomes a here's the information about the bond and what we're trying to put forward. So we're getting the word out there, but making the community forum about the defeasement, I would rather go the survey route for that.
Right. Are you talking about checking the passability or the specifics?
I'm concerned about the passability.
Right, and so then is that what you're wanting the community forum to be about, the passability, or are you wanting it to go into the specifics of how it's allocated?
I think the passability, because I do think if we open up the can at a community forum about defeasement, I think we're opening up a can that maybe we don't want to open up. We want everybody's opinion on it, and I think we've gotten a lot of people's opinion on it. I feel like it's a conversation that's been going on for a long time.
So let me ask you, are you suggesting then the 4.9 million that the committee is recommending to use for some of these projects, are you saying not to use any of that at all, or are you saying defease the whole 11 million? Actually, I thought the number was 13 million, but let's just say 11 million for right now. So are you suggesting the whole thing, or part of the money going toward the plan?
Oh, I think at this point, I'm suggesting defeasing all the money. That would be my opinion and my thoughts towards it.
Well, so
and that goes towards the goodwill and the passability of this bond.
To me, I just think that's something we ask the community. I like Mr. Thorner's idea. Theoretically, you could have one community forum or a couple of them, devote the first hour to one issue, the second hour to another issue, or you could separate them. It just depends on how much time we're willing to devote to them. I do like the idea of taking the community's temperature, because things have changed in the last 15 years, or even since we did this last bond that passed and built these fabulous schools that people are still talking great things about. I think we owe it to them also to ask. There's no harm in asking. We still have the right to vote, because it's the board has to make that decision, but I would like to make it with input of the community, knowing what people are. And it may be a tough decision. It may be very close, maybe 50-50. It's hard to make up your mind sometimes on that. Then you're stuck with using your best judgment, your conscience for what you feel is right. But I think at a minimum, we owe it to them to ask, though. Anyway. More comments? More discussion? Mr. Heath?
No, I'm good.
So
Mr.
where
Thornton?
are we going from here?
So, I suggest, when is our next meeting?
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
We get a message out with some possible dates and be prepared to discuss it at the next meeting, what we want, because this is still in July, right? So it's not like we have to rush to do this today.
Plus, we're going to take public comment now, so anybody that wants to speak on this issue is.
That's true.
It's more input, and then we can talk about it in 2 weeks. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't rush through something as important as this, so. Okay, any more board discussion? That's a nice, healthy discussion today.
It's a good
so
discussion.
I appreciate that from everybody. All right, but we do have one more item before we get to, I think, the public comment, and that is the West Valley Little League Partnership, which I read through, I really liked immensely.
Yeah, so
So-
item B is West Valley Little League Partnership, and I included this in the board packet that West Valley Little League has approached us and said that they would like to expand the number of ball fields that they have at the Cottonwood campus. There is land that is east of Cottonwood that we could look at, and it does not need board vote on this. However, I definitely want to have direction from the board that I'm not moving forward without direction from the board. I have the authority to sign off on the permits that would be needed. There's some advantages here for our kids in having more ball fields, but also advantage to the district that if this project has eventually a connection to the Yakima City wastewater and sewer line, that would be really good for the district to be able to have eventually Cottonwood connect to that. And so, there's some benefits there for our facilities, and then also, of course, benefits for our kids. And just looking for direction from the board.
I just have a couple questions for you real quick on that, 'cause I was there at the agenda prep and we talked a little bit about this. So what I wasn't clear on, and maybe you have a better feel for this, is any of this land that they would use part of the land that is, that's a big swath of land there? Is this going to use up the remaining piece, or is there still another parcel of land that will be unused?
They're still in the planning phases, and so we are looking at either the empty lot that is far east or the soccer field that's currently not being used, because the soccer field is not used by the community. I guess all the community use now is really over at Soso, and that soccer field was not scheduled all during this last year for any community use. So there's opportunities either direction, and they're kind of looking at what the cost would be to get the sewer line out. And we're just basically.
I think we're going to say the same thing.
We pulled up on the parcel, and I believe I remember correctly, it's one parcel. It's not using the whole parcel, but
That's what I
think
thought.
it's
I just
one
wanted
parcel.
to clarify that. So,
Yeah.
because I didn't realize that the soccer field was not being used at all. It might be a wise idea to use that, but again, I'm totally okay with whatever you decide on that, Peter. It's just, if we had that vacant parcel of land, it would leave us an option down the road to do something else with it, like sell it or do something that we might want to do. But that's my only concern. And then the last piece I had on there, so in reading through it again this time, it said we have the option to connect, but we would pay half of it.
We're still working out the details on what the feasibility is. So we're not in a position where nothing's finalized at this point.
Yeah,
but I didn't want to have people put a bunch of time and energy into a project that wasn't supported by the board. That's why
I'm all for it. I'm just curious about future costs.
I'm for it too. I think what's new is the cost, splitting the cost to the sewer and the water, and so I would want to know more about that. But otherwise, I think Joe Connolly said it, that it's really a no-brainer.
It is. I agree.
For those, I guess, that weren't there, it's really a donor that's, or maybe a couple donors that are just paying the cost for land that the district owes to upgrade it to some nice baseball fields. And they already have the lease, so they're going to continue using it either way. They just want our permission to make it better.
Right. Additional parking, concession, and restroom facility.
Yeah.
And that's where the sewer line comes in.
Yeah. The only reason I asked that question, I'm just wondering if I totally accept, it makes more sense to do this. I totally accept if it's going to cost us something. I just wondered if you had a ballpark figure, because if we find out later, well, it's $3 million to do this, it's a different discussion versus, you know, 300,000. So if you know, we're thinking that it's really kind of a minimal amount down the road, even if it is half of it that we pay, I'm still totally for it, because I think it's a great idea, it's a great use of that space anyway. And again, I go back, it's for the community and the kids that live here, so
Right.
I like it a
Well,
lot.
we're still looking at, like, what the cost would be. Maybe, you know, nothing's finalized, but maybe West Valley Little League would pay for the connection to the restroom facility that they're making, and then if we wanted to have Cottonwood Connect, we'd pay for the rest of
I
that
see.
line. Just
Okay.
kind of looking at still looking at options at this point.
Okay.
But anyways, other board members, just
I'm in support.
okay.
No, I think we're all.
Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you.
All right.
That's what I was looking for.
All right, now we get to the part where we have public comments regarding discussion items that we just talked about. So, Mr. Marinacci, please stand up to the mic.
Is there a mic? There's.
Yeah, I think it
Podium,
picks
how's
up.
that?
Podium.
What a fascinating discussion. I was thinking about, what is his name pronounced, Corey Plager?
Plager, yeah.
Plager. I talked to him before the discussion. I was thinking about Mr. Wilcott's question about 25 years. So my recommendation to the board is to totally jump after that 25-year option. As Mr. Plager was saying, if you don't do it, you're not going to get that option again. And you guys had this really interesting discussion about the 4.9 million and commentary that, yeah, we think we're going to get under. Well, he even said he has to go back and check and said, you know, it might be really close. If you go 25 years or 23 years, like you say, you have all that flexibility. Mr. Kemper made a comment, I want to win, right? I want this thing to pass. Mr. Thorne said, I want this to pass. From my standpoint, I think one of the best sales pitches to our community that we can make is we're going to go under. Not flat, but under. I think that's a powerful message to the community. And if you go 25 years, you can get there. Okay, so what's the negative? The negative is you're going to have higher interest expense. Well, guess what happened with the high school bond? We had 2 refinances, and Sheila can attest to all the money that we saved by doing that. So over a 25-year period, there's a chance that we could effectively refinance, get a lower rate, and a little bit, like I say, have our cake and eat it too. Now, is there, again, I'm a finance guy, is there going to be ultimately a higher interest dollars out of the pocket? Absolutely. We can't kid ourselves. And that is a consideration for us as taxpayers. At the same time, by having that available room and the potential recoup part of that with a refinance, I think it's something that we should really take seriously. So that would be my recommendation. Dr. Finch knows I've been pushing this all along since the get-go. The other thing that ad nauseum talked about, we don't want to go through what we went through the last time, and we're going to hear about from bond counsel. However, if bond counsel, and I tend to recall potentially from when this was talked about, I don't think we can do it, but if we can't do it, an idea I have is twofold. Can you establish with our existing policies that you create a new policy that stipulates if we want a bond, this is what we do with excess money. We're going to go ahead and defease it back to the community. So I don't know, Dr. Finch, if that's an option, but I'm just throwing it out there. Because the message you want to send to the community is you don't want it to be nebulous. I mean, clearly everyone spoke about how monstrously painful this whole thing. And I attended all those community meetings, and we had about 3 of them. And, you know, it was about 50-50 between people saying, hey, give the money back, and people saying, no, spend it. We want to obviate that ever happening again. So whether we can do it through the bond council says we can do it, or we can have a policy, or the school board just votes, just makes it crystal clear. Another thing, and I talked about this with Tony, because I knew he was presenting today, and I was going on vacation, and this is a sales presentation to the community. And Mr. Strong brought it up a little bit. You got to keep this simple. You get in the weeds. So the quick elevator to the community is, what are we doing? And I really liked, this page is pretty close. I'd make a few edits, but this is what Tony and Natalie were presenting earlier, and it just makes it crystal clear. You know, we're going to do these 3 schools. whether or not we include the capital budget in. You got to keep it simple. If we can't go to our neighbors and say, hey, Mr. Thornton, this is what we're going to go ahead and do here. We got 3 projects on the gym, and then we can dive in a little bit deeper, because you already know, I had somebody who asked me before this meeting, what are you doing at the junior high? Hello? And we have to be quick on our feet to explain what that storyline is, say, well, look, actually, this is a really good deal. We're taking this, we're moving to the mid-high, we're doing a mid-level campus, we're getting the maximum dollars with the match. I mean, my goodness, the match is a great sales point to this whole thing. And what do we do at the junior high? You know what? It's going to have district offices. We're still going to have it available to the students. So it's not going away, and it's going to have a community use, which the public's want. Anyway, I'm just giving, some ideas. It has to be crisp to the point. We can't get in the weeds. If we get in the weeds, we're lost. And there's a little bit of commentary just about this, this 4.9. I'm of the opinion, if you go negative, that's going to work against us. And I just feel there's a sense of, yes, as the community members, however, big community forming, I guess my gut feeling, I have to process it a little bit more, might be no, because I think the community spoke about it. You guys have heard all the storyline. Do I think you should get a pulse of the community by asking, maybe a survey? Great. Having a community, no. The main event here is the new bond. You already said the 4.9 out of 90, whatever. The main event is the new bond. I think we need to get focused in on that and find a way how we can make a pitch to the community. And our committee, again, I don't want to pat myself, but I mean, what Phil talked about, and we challenged them. We said, no, this is bogus, go back on this sort of thing. And I think we have a better product as a result, and I think we're being wise stewards of the taxpayers' money by the utilization to have a global campus. And one thing that wasn't talked about, we're not going to affect the fields. So we don't have the sporting fields. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the fly. So thank you.
All right, thank you for your comment. Anyone else?
Yeah.
You're a taxpayer in West Valley.
And I should remind everyone, Mr. Marinacci is like a regular face here. But please introduce yourself, your name, rank, serial. No.
Amber Stousgill. I am a taxpayer and a mom, but I'm the principal of the junior high. And I appreciate, Mr. Strong, what you said about our 4.9 million and the critical projects that are on there. And I wanted to bring just a tiny bit of life to some of those projects. I think it's easy, to talk about whether or not the money should be defeased, and if that's all it was as a taxpayer, I'm like, well, I get it, right? But I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for our staff and our students. The water is a critical issue, the piping, that's something that really, we'll be lucky if we decide to not go that route and it's just lumped in, say, to the bond, and say the bond passes. I feel like we're gonna be lucky if it lasts that long. So that's a concern, because that's money that's going to have to be spent either way, right? And that's a lot of money. So I think that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. This may seem like a small thing to some people, but to me it's a big deal. It affected one student this year, but this is one student, every student matters. So the lack of ADA compliance in our auditorium concerns me. It's disheartening to see that we're not able to perform in there, because that would mean that one of our students couldn't perform in the auditorium. That makes me emotional, because I care about our kids. And so having to move and perform somewhere else because that one student couldn't get on the stage, it concerns me. Along with just the lack that we've had to take chairs, the seating in the auditorium, they're old, and our custodians have done an amazing job of taking chairs out and repurposing them when chairs break, and people come in and they weld them, and so we're losing capacity in that auditorium that's used K-12 for our community, and even outside of our musical and our plays, we have other dance organizations and people that come in and perform, and so I just think all of our kids in our community deserve to be on that stage. And then lastly, this is going to sound so tiny, but you talk to our PE teachers, and this is something I've been hearing about for the last 3 years, but the curtain in the gym breaks every single year. It is old. And so that's on the list. And it's a tiny deal, but it's a big deal because that's their classroom, right? And so we run 2 PE classes in the gym every period and use it for JROTC, and we pull the curtain down so that we can use it as multiple classrooms essentially. And then we also, of course, pull it down for basketball games, things like that. So just like I said, wanted to bring life to some of those things that are on the list that seem so small, but they really add up and they make a big difference for our kids and for our staff. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I know we don't respond to public comments.
Yes.
But, was it 1 or 2 of those things included in the 13 million?
Correct. Yeah.
Which
We
ones?
were holding off on any improvements to the junior high
Oh,
because we were
until
waiting
we
for the
won the
long-range
bond
facilities planning committee to do their work, because we didn't want to put money into the junior high and then eventually say, oh, well, that's going to be demolished. So we were waiting for tonight's report.
Okay.
But the 2 projects that Amber just talked about, the domestic water piping replacement and the ADA compliance for the auditorium, those have been approved by the school board, but we are putting on hold to move forward until tonight's presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else, please?
My name is Shane Moore. I have 3 students in the district, and my wife is a substitute teacher in the district. Not a member of the planning team or anything, just saw this was on the agenda and wanted to be here tonight. I am excited about this bond issue. My kids did go to a tandem for 2 years before they were redistricted to Summerview. And that school, it is a family, and my wife loves to sub there, but there are struggles. Having no cafeteria, the teachers have to be in the classroom during lunch, and that just adds more. My oldest just finished 7th grade, and having to commute back and forth every day, and she's a trombone player, and has to carry that with her every day. And I'm sure, Rochelle, their backpacks are heavy because they have all their books in them, and my daughter's not that big. And so having them all under one campus, I was telling my wife about this plan when I read it, because I read the board packet every Friday when it comes out, and I mentioned this was on it, and my daughter says, good, but I don't get to experience it. Why can't I do that tomorrow? So I am excited to see this being done. I would say, and I know there are so many more pressing projects, long term, I would also say as a district that prides itself in its fine arts, our auditoriums and our space for our fine arts do not hold up. As a district that says it has one of the best music programs and band programs in the state, just 2 weeks ago I was at Bothell High School for a different type of meeting, and we used their auditorium. And I gotta tell you, it's one of the best auditoriums fine arts facilities I've seen. And if we want to continue to say that we have one of the best fine arts programs in the state, our facilities have to keep up as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, anyone?
Ben Jensen, I was on the committee, and I wasn't here for the presentation, but I'm sure they did a great job. We actually talked about the 4.9 quite a bit on the committee, if I remember right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but because some of those projects would have an escalation, right? If we didn't do it today, the 4.9, it would be $5.5 or $6 million at a higher rate, right? So, I mean, from a financial perspective, you know, I thought it made a lot of sense to do that. I totally understand we need to get the buy-in from everyone, right? That's the biggest thing. And you know, if you actually look at it, I think when it was presented to us, if we use the 4.9, to Peter's point, we could definitely be under what we currently are, right? The biggest thing is be under the current rate that we are right now. Like that was, as a committee, that was our whole goal, right? We want to make sure that we're under that rate. And with that 4.9, we could be under that rate for sure, right? By 2 or 3%. If we didn't use that 4.9, there was a possibility that it would be flat or, you know, somewhere in there. And so with that, we as a committee, I thought if we use that, we could for sure be under that, the current rate. So, but I would also, what was your name?
Shane.
Shane. I have 5 kids in the district. I'm going to be here for a long time, and my kids participate in the music, fine arts programs, and I would echo his comments. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Good comments. Anyone else? Please.
My name's David Kobia. I wasn't planning to be here until my wife asked me to come and attend. She's part of the committee. And I wasn't going to say anything, but I thought it would be good to get a perspective of somebody that's in the community, has kids in the school, but isn't as involved as a member that's on the committee. I was actually really surprised we're even still talking about defeasance. I thought we had the community forums. I thought we had feedback. The fact that the decision's not already made, I think if you bring it up to the community again, there's going to be a lot of frustration. Like, we're talking about this still. What's going on? Why can't we make a decision? Let's move forward. I'm super excited about the bond. That was really exciting to see all that work that's gone into preparing for the schools and where the money's going to go. That's awesome. But for me, personally, I don't feel like we need to defease anything. I think there's a reason why it's only happened once in the last 20 years, and I think being good stewards of the money that we have is critical. So we can talk about that, and it's been talked about a lot, but I just felt like it was important for me to communicate how I responded just hearing about this after hearing all the different community forums and being involved with those in the past. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. All right, we will close public comments regarding the discussion. Thank you all for your participation. Moving on to item 11 on the agenda, items arising. Any board members, anything new? Like to bring up? All right, all I can say is I'm looking forward to the start of the new year and the new sports seasons for our athletic teams. It's going to be a fun ride to see them back on the courts, depending on how you look at it. Superintendent's report, it's in the packet. Anything you'd like to add?
I just talked about our summer programming, so we do have some summer programs going on. We have summer reading and STEAM for all elementary students on Tuesdays at White Hollow from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. And then we have Play and Learn for families with children birth to age 5. That's at the Innovation Center in the Family Engagement classroom, and that's on Fridays 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon, and that's all throughout the summer, both Tuesdays at White Hollow, Fridays at Innovation Center, and some other special categorical projects that we have, and that's in the board packet. So
thank you.
I'm going to share that.
All right, moving on to item 13, board reports, board development. Anyone? All right, I'll go ahead and call the meeting. Thank you everybody for being in attendance today, especially our presenters and other members of the community. Meeting is adjourned 9:24 p.m. Tuesday, July 8th. Thank you.